So my name's Corey. I'm an occupational therapist. I work for the Center of Orthopedics here in Brunswick. One of my roles here is a certified hand therapist, but we also offer as another additional specialty is ergonomic assessments. Ergonomic assessment is basically, as we talk about ergonomics, it's looking at an interaction between the person and their equipment or tools or their environment they work in, whether it's a traditional more office setup or also looking at an industry, so commercial, steel workers, any manual laborers, also looking at what they do and analyzing those movement patterns to identify areas of risk for injury. Typically when I come in, I'll ask someone to just basically perform whatever job task that they have to do. So for Brandon, he'll be sitting here, he'll be at his workstation doing his job as he normally does. And we'll go through and just look at his movement patterns to identify where some of the risk factors are going to be, where he has a potential for an injury. So as we sit here and watch Brandon work, and he's typing on his keyboard, some of the first things that we'll notice is his chair support, his reaching of the arms, some of the positioning here and the posture is bad. As he looks to use some of his stuff, whether it's the phone, his computer, they're awfully far away and the angles aren't very good. So there's a lot of excess reaching going on. So we would go through and basically start at kind of the feet and work our way up, but continue to watch how he's working so we can identify all the little tricks and bad things that he's doing posturally, mechanically, so we can reduce those risk factors. So some of the problems that we look at and we'll identify is certainly his posture. So having his chair in a really poor position like this and not being supported, he ends up doing a lot of forward tilt, the shoulders are reaching a lot. So one of the things that we look at is getting his chair a little more upright, so that way he's not reaching and he's also supported more. Few other things as we look at people when they use their phone, typically do a lot of excessive reaching. They tend to multitask, so they're using their computer and their phone tucked up under here, so which places a lot of stress on the neck area. So we would eliminate that. And then they tend to multitask more, so they'll do a lot of reaching, which places a lot of stress onto the shoulders, wrist, elbows, is another common thing that we'll see that we want to eliminate. Also typing style. Typically people will rest on their wrists when they should be up neutrally and engaged. So it places a lot of stressor onto the wrist and thumbs, which can create injuries through that area. So we made a few changes to Brandon's workstation. One of the first things that we actually did is we adjusted his chair so he'd have more support. So we locked it into a more upright position, so he's sitting tall, his core supported, so he doesn't have to slouch and reach all day. The other thing we did is we moved his mouse and keyboard a little bit closer, so he's not reaching for that. We also got Brandon a headset for his phone, so he can use his phone and continue to do his typing and mousing without putting a lot of stress to his neck. We gave him a dual monitor to help with his work activities because he was multitasking between two screens. We also raised him up so it would prevent some of the cervical flexion and extension positions that he was in to allow him to have a nice neutral spine during his workday. So the other thing we're going to do is we're also going to talk to Brandon about making sure he's using good technique with the equipment that he has, as we've changed and decreased some of his reaching and also his new positioning, is watching how he's typing and how he's mousing. So before, Brandon was doing a lot of resting on the wrist supports while he was typing and mousing. So we really would encourage him to increase his awareness by making sure his wrists are nice and neutral and only resting when he's not working in this type of position. And when he's typing, his wrist needs to be up and neutral. Also looking at his mouse, he was pivoting off his wrist before, and he was actually using his wrist while he was mousing, and it should be more of a shoulder motion. So we'd encourage him to work from the shoulder and move his whole arm to move the mouse, not just his wrist. So some of the first things I also look at when we get new equipment is revisiting how he's doing things and making sure that we gave him the right equipment and he's utilizing it properly. So I usually like to make sure his feet are supported. So in Brandon's case, we have a foot support here, which someone may need or may not need. The feet want to be supported flat on the floor or on the footrest with his ankles about 90 degrees to slightly open. And then same thing at the knees. We want to make sure that the knees are bent about 90 degrees to slightly open, with your knees being slightly below the hips. He wants to make sure he's sitting back in his chair completely, which he is. He wants to be able to have enough space in between the back of his knee and the chair, which would be about 3 to 4 fingers, just so the chair is not jamming in the back of the leg, so people are a little more comfortable while they're working. Then we come up to the upper extremity and we want to make sure his arms are resting at his side comfortably, typically about a 90-degree angle at the elbow where he's not reaching, so that way he's at a comfortable spot with his keyboard. And then the monitor usually wants to be about arm's length away. And we also want to make sure the top of the screen, so this monitor would come up a little bit higher, but this monitor would be about the right height where his eyes are hitting that top of the screen area. And if he's using a dual monitor, we want to make sure it's kind of split evenly, versus if they are using one, you'd center that on the person, the keyboard, and the monitor.